I'm Eric R. Christoph of HoverAndSmile, and welcome to Combat Reloaded. I wanted to take this time and go over some of the changes we made to our foam combat flyer, the Mach 1 model, designed by Chameleon and drawn up by myself, yours truly, on the HoverAndSmile website. We posted this last year. We've had some real fun with these foam combat flyers. And once again, if you haven't seen this before, check out HoverAndSmile.com/combat and you can learn all about it. Now, the general basic principles of building the combat flyer still apply. We're going to go over some things, some slight tweaks and fixes and good combinations for motors and props that we've discovered over the last year, but still remains the same. No streamers here. This is full-on contact. We got gashes here on this combat flyer. We got some gashes here. We've got some prop strikes here. This foam flyer has been through at least 2 battles and achieved victory on both. So I'm a little proud of this one. We'll probably fly it again until it completely crashes. I'm going to see how long I can fly it without having to repair it. It doesn't fly exactly as good as a new one will because now my control surface is a little beat up, but hey, we're going to go with it and see what happens. So let's go over some of the different changes that we made to the combat flyer over this last year. First off, the plans. We've cleaned up the plans a little bit. We imported them into Google SketchUp and redrew them, so now you get an actual plan layout view of the pieces, as well as be able to see a 3-dimensional view of the combat flyer. As far as changes to the dimensions go, roughly still the same. The only big notice is that the battery block has moved down a little bit. It doesn't come out as far up here. The battery can move forward a little bit, still adjustable based on your Velcro, wherever you put the battery, but it allows us to move that CG up a little bit. Instead of really trying to balance the plane right here on this corner notch, we usually go in about 1/4 to 1/2 inch in front of it. That seems to work out well for us, so that's kind of the recommended CG point. Other than that, the plans really haven't changed too much. The construction is still the same. You cut out all your pieces and you're building up a tiered fuselage. 1, 2, 3 pieces of foam, 1/4 inch thick on the top, and then 3 on the bottom for your battery block. Not really changing much anywhere else there. But the plans are a little bit cleaner, easier to see, and you get a 3-dimensional representation of the craft and see what it's going to look like after you've completed your assembly. One correction that I did want to make to our first build video of the Mach 1 combat flyer, pointed out to me by an astute viewer, EJ Murphy, was that our control horn, where it meets the control rod, that point was just a little too far behind the hinge line. We really want that right directly above the hinge line. So you want to keep that in mind when you're making your control horns up. One of the changes in terms of materials that I did make for the control horns was that I've gone to a Lexan plastic. And I learned this lesson a little bit the hard way. I was previously using some light plywood, which works fine as a control horn, until a prop comes by and smacks the living crap out of it. Splits that wood quite easily, and then pirouettes down. So, picked up some 2 to 3 millimeter Lexan plastic sheet. Really easy to cut. You just draw your lines, cut, score, and snap. And now I make my control rods out of this. An entire sheet of this that was really kind of about out to here cost me about $4. And now I just make my control rods out of this material. Works great, as well as being able to make a receiver protection box, if you will. Usually your receiver, especially if you're flying Spectrum or the Aerotronics receivers, or if you're TAB or JR, if you're using 2.4 gigahertz, you don't want to really risk your receiver in the craft. So you can build a light plywood or a Lexan box to put around your receiver to protect it from a prop strike. Other than that, the materials that we use really are cheap enough to where you still may want to recess them a bit inside the foam fuselage to protect them. But if you're going to get a hit, you're going to lose maybe a $10 motor at the most, but not the $40 to $50 receiver if you're using receivers that expensive. One item that we did reference last year, but I do want to reemphasize, is having a Velcro strap through the fuselage all the way to the backside where your battery mounts. Very useful for keeping that battery on. I've built one combat flyer and I didn't have the Velcro strap, and after doing a few loops and watching the battery disconnect and then your plane land over there and your battery land over there, you really don't want to have that happen if you can afford not to. So definitely invest in some just light Velcro straps and really make sure that battery's nice and secure on your craft. Now, if you watched some of the previous combat videos, you may have noticed our combat flyer was blue, and now we've got this girly combat flyer. Well, okay, so it is pink and it is a little girly looking, and it's not really screaming bloody murder of combat, full-on contact death by propeller. It's a different type of foam than the Dow protection board fanfold. This is Owens Corning pink board, and it's still 6 millimeters thick. It's still fanfold, but the nice thing is that it doesn't have the waves that the blue fanfold has along the length of the foam. It is just a little more brittle and a little heavier. It's kind of closer to Depron in its brittleness, but it's not as brittle as Depron. I think it's worthwhile to give it a shot. I've enjoyed working with this foam. It's really a pleasure to work with compared to the waves and the blue fanfold. So I'm going to continue to make some more combat flyers out of this foam and probably make it my foam of choice. Although the blue fanfold still works fine, still works great, I do kind of prefer working with something that's a little more smooth out along the length of the foam. Now, as far as some changes to the power system goes, previously we'd been using a 2600 kV motor that ran a 2-cell battery, and that worked well for our combat flyers. They flew just fine. I preferred a little more power though over time, especially to combat wind on the windier days, as well as just to give a little more oomph when you're doing all those crazy rolls and maneuvers with the combat flyer. So for the Mach 1, we've changed from my preferred motor to a CF2812 Emax motor, a little red can guy here, available from headsuprc.com. And it's a 1600 kV motor, runs with 3 or 2 cells. I prefer a 3-cell battery, about 1000 milliamp is your minimum, up to 1800 milliamp is your max. I prefer the 1.3 1300 milliamp 3-cell batteries, 20C discharge minimum. I prefer those with an 8x4 prop. That seems to be a really sweet combination. An 18 amp to 25 amp speed control will handle all your amp power requirements just fine. So the CF2812 Emax red can motor from headsuprc.com. 8x4 prop, 1300 milliamp 3-cell battery, 20C discharge, 18 amp, 25 amp speed control, and the combat flyer hits a real sweet spot of being able to get out of the way fast, attack fast, handle the wind, and give you that power that you need for those fast maneuvers. One thing that I also wanted to mention, servos. We had tried some 5-gram and 9-gram servos in the combat flyer, and I'm starting to move towards the 9-gram side. The 5 grams have generally worked okay, but we started stripping out a few gears on them too much. And I would think that if anything, I'd prefer probably a 9-gram servo. I haven't really stripped any of those out with a combat flyer, that is. So although you can get the 5-gram Hextronics or Tower Pro servos, I've kind of moved off to the 9 grams, and I haven't had to worry about a servo strip since. Previous to that, I've stripped a few servos after some combat moves, and although they are cheaper servos and you get what you pay for, the 9 grams seem to have at least behaved a little bit better for us. Remember, on the combat flyers, you do want to keep it cheap, but not so cheap that you can't fly it at all. Full-on contact combat, of course, requires more than one person. If it's just you, it's really not that fun and kind of disturbing. So you've got your friends, and they've got their combat flyers. You built them, they built them, whoever's built them, whatever. You take those combat flyers up, and you fly them around, and then all of a sudden you realize you can't see if your plane is this one or that one or the other. So you want to have some distinguishing marks on your plane. Now, we've used Sharpie markers, we've used some foam-safe paint, we've also used colored packing tape, be it from red, blue, green, your whole rainbow colors to even the chrome and the metallic types of looks. So make sure that you paint your combat flyer with some unique distinguishing marks along the front side as well as the back. Now, this looks a little weird and tribal, I might say, but it still makes it easily distinguished from one combat flyer to another. We've used Sharpie markers on this example. We've got paint that we used on the bottom here. I've got this black and this yellow view. And then on the top, I've got a shaded out gray off to the red, and then some horribly ugly green-red combination on the rudder. And then, of course, if you're using different foam, the foam itself, pink, automatically easily distinguishes it from the blue combat flyers. But then again, you might want to have some different colors to it so that you can tell the top from bottom as well as the direction of your craft. So it's not only to tell your craft from another, but it's also orientation, top and bottom, and where you're going. All those different color combinations, the patterns as well as the types of colors, really make a combat flyer stand out and help you fly better. The Combat Flyer Mach 1 version was originally designed by Chameleon. He's allowed us to put this up on HoverAndSmile to give to the world, to spread the infectious need for foam carnage. Now, this Combat Flyer has been viewed by quite a few visitors to the site as well as our YouTube videos, and we've had a few clubs as well as some individuals send us some correspondence and some pictures of our Combat Flyer design being used elsewhere, and not only in combat events, but also just the experience of building one of these simple foam Delta Wing flyers. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of those now that we've received over the last year. A visitor by the name of Pants Seat Flyer has a very informative and humorous, well-written post documenting his adventures with our Delta Wing combat flyer. From building one to some lessons learned on his end, it's been an enjoyable read, and I hope you check it out at pantsseatflyer.blogspot.com. And now off to our southwest. The Chena Valley Model Aviators Inc. in Chena Valley, Arizona have not only held combat competitions with the Mach 1 combat flyer, they've also made some remarkable modifications to the design as well. Here's the giant-sized version, the Mach 1 cruiser, if you will, followed by a dual brushless combat flyer. I'm totally taken aback by it. It looks great. With about 7 or so members building these combat flyers and more to come, they've really brought forth the foam carnage to northern Arizona. Check them out at cvma-online.com. I'm Eric R. Christoph of HoverAndSmile, and this has been Combat Reloaded, taking a look at the Mach 1 combat flyer and how it's changed over the last year and how other people have taken the design and run with it to achieve that blissful state of full-on contact foamy carnage of death and doom and destruction. All right, so I got to work on the wording a little bit, but you get the idea. Now, Chameleon has been busy working on some different combat plane designs and plans, and as those evolve, and we've got the builds and footage of that to show you, we'll have that up on HoverAndSmile.com, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.